behalf of all those with developmental disabilities, their family members, their loved ones, congratulations to Marshall and Jürgen Alsop, and thank you to our founder, Ronnie Heyman. So we've now come to the 2018 Federal Employee of the Year. The honoree found treatments for more than a dozen mysterious diseases and alleviated the suffering of thousands of patients in the United States and around the world. To present the award, please welcome the Director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you for what you do by being our MC for this very special evening. I come to this every year as one of the high moments of the experience of being a public servant, to see the ways in which these many individuals have transformed our world by their dedicated service. And it's a privilege to be able to talk to you tonight about one of them, the Federal Employee of the Year. And again, I think maybe we ought to give a little bit of a round of applause to the Partnership for Public Service and to Max Stier for what they do every year by bringing us together. Dr. Daniel Kastner has done trailblazing work to identify an entirely new class of rare genetic illnesses known as autoinflammatory diseases, inherited disorders that cause the body to activate those powerful systems that are designed to fight off infection. But for these patients, there is no infection present. The consequences of that activated system include high fevers, arthritis, skin rashes, severe abdominal and chest pain, and ultimately organ failure. Dan found the causes and the treatments for many of these rare disorders, which led him to being called the father of the field of autoinflammation. Dan leads a remarkable clinical group at NIH that sees patients from all over the country, in fact, all over the world, with unexplained illnesses. They must figure out what new disease they're seeing and then how it might be treated. Dan has already uncovered the genetic cause of 7 of these autoinflammatory conditions. He's identified 14 other disorders that cause suffering and developed effective treatments for all but 2 of them. As just one example, a teenager in Texas named Hallie is one of the many people who are immensely grateful for Dan's discoveries. Hallie had 7 strokes before she turned 9 and suffered from high fevers and unrelenting pain, keeping her from going to school or being able to play with her friends. Dan figured out the molecular cause of her illness at the DNA level and prescribed a rational biological medicine. The result has been a recovery that Hallie's mother has simply called a miracle. Hallie now has no pain, no fever, has not had another stroke, and is going to school and spending time with her friends. Let's hear more about Dan's insatiable curiosity to solve these medical mysteries.
So that the first disease gene that I started working on, which was way back in the 1980s, the late 1980s, is a disease called familial Mediterranean fever, FMF. It's a disease where patients have recurring fevers, and with the fever, the patient will have either severe arthritis or terrible abdominal pain, or sharp stabbing chest pain from inflammation of the lining around the lungs. There's some gene that is a master regulator of inflammation, and if we could discover that, we'd learn a whole lot about how inflammation works and maybe even be able to come up with some new treatments for inflammatory disease. It took us actually from the time that I saw my first patient to the time that we discovered the gene, 12 years. But in point of fact, the dream came true. The gene that we found actually was something that was not known before the time that we discovered it in 1997. I think back to when we first discovered the gene for familial Mediterranean fever, and it's just one letter in the 3 billion letter genetic code that's off that leads to this disease where people get fevers, terrible abdominal pain, and eventually develop kidney failure. One letter that's off. When I'm seeing patients who have these diseases, there is nothing more special in life than to be able to walk into an exam room and see a patient that has a disease that we've discovered and that we've figured out how it works and that we've developed a treatment for it and that they're alive today because of the fact that we've done what we've done. And what could be better? What could be more gratifying than that?
Now, before I invite Dan to the stage, we have special guests who would like to express their appreciation. Among Dan's patients are 3 siblings who share a rare genetic disease, which is abbreviated TRAPS. As children, they experienced the frequent debilitating pain and fever of this autoinflammatory condition. As adults, and now with families of their own, they have Dan to thank for relieving that pain and suffering. 2 of those 3 siblings were able to join us here tonight. Please welcome Rob Damshin and Carolyn Wise.
Thank you, Dr. Collins, and thank you for allowing my sister and I to be part of this special evening. My 2 sisters, my father, and I have all been patients of Dr. Kastner's for nearly 20 years. Growing up, I was an energetic kid, playing Little League, climbing trees, playing as much golf as possible. Unfortunately, I also experienced frequent episodes of unexplained high fever, rash, and pain throughout my body that completely incapacitated me dozens of times a year. Playing 18 holes one day, doubled over in pain the next. No one knew why. Years of trips to hospitals up and down the West Coast in search of answers, Stanford, UCLA, Scripps, and others. Over a decade of questions without answers. In 2000, Dr. Kastner was presenting his latest research on autoinflammatories, to a room of peers from around the country. Thankfully, in the audience was my childhood rheumatologist. Following that presentation, my doctor told Dr. Kastner, "I have a family for you. You have to meet the Damshins." Dr. Kastner gave us new hope that we would finally have answers. Throughout high school, my family flew from our home in California to the NIH hospital in Bethesda every few months to try a new treatment. The Children's Inn at the NIH campus was our second home. Dr. Kastner not only diagnosed my family's disease called TRAPS, but I'm happy to say that thanks to new treatments, I've been symptom-free for nearly a year. Even more important to me now is the well-being of my 6-month-old son, Owen. Blood tests confirmed he has the same genetic disease as I do, and my sisters and my dad. Where there were only questions from my parents, my wife and I now have answers. Because of Dr. Kastner, Owen's childhood will look very different from mine. On behalf of my sisters, our father and my son, and the rest of our family, thank you, Dr. Kastner. You've changed our lives. Congratulations on this much-deserved recognition.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in congratulating the 2018 Federal Employee of the Year, Dr. Daniel Kastner.
Well, thank you so much, Francis, and thank you, Rob and Carolyn, for being here tonight. This is so special. I mean, in the film asking what could be better, well, this is something that comes pretty close to being better. This is really fantastic. So anyway, you know, before I get started just making a few remarks, I do want to say that it is really such a humbling experience being up here before you right now, having heard the other stories that were told earlier this evening, and to be in the company of those people is just such an amazing honor and a humbling experience. I can't begin to tell you how that feels. So anyway, I do want to thank very much the Partnership for Public Service and their sponsors for everything that they are doing, for their steadfast support of the federal workforce. It is really, really amazing and important to all of us. I want to thank my boss, Dr. Eric Green, the director of the National Human Genome Research Institute, for nominating me for this really special award. It is absolutely incredible to be here before you. And I also want to thank my mentors at the NIH for taking a chance on me back 30 years ago when I was just embarking on the adventure that we're talking about this evening. And at that time, we were working using a technique, an approach, positional cloning, which was something that at that time was a new idea that actually Francis was one of the major developers of. That really revolutionized the way that we can approach a lot of medical problems. But it was at that time untested, and so I really have to thank the people that supported me at that time for really using a new approach for what was then a number of obscure diseases that nobody knew for sure if we were going to find anything of value or not. I also want to thank the people that work in my research laboratory for their dedication and creativity, my colleagues in the clinic who have made numerous astute observations with regard to the patients that we see and have been incredibly compassionate in terms of the care that they give to our patients, to the patients themselves for being partners in this adventure of discovery, to the administrative staff of the NIH who make it all possible, and of course to my best friend and wife of 33 years, Margaret Beckwith, and my sons Ben and Nathan for supporting me through all of this over many years of work. I'd also like to point out that the American public really deserves a great deal of thanks for their wisdom and their willingness to create the tools and to support the tools that have made these discoveries possible. The tool of the Human Genome Project, which at its outset certainly was something for which there were a lot of people questioning whether we should do that. The NIH Research Hospital in Bethesda that Robbie was talking about a moment ago, that really is an incredible resource for all of us and is the largest research hospital in the world. And of course, the intramural research program of the NIH itself, which is a program that is dedicated to long-term, high-risk, high-reward projects of exactly the type that we're talking about tonight. So anyway, thank you all very much for being here. I thank the partnership for this great honor of being here before you, and Francis and Robbie and Carolyn for being here for me as well. So thank you all very much.